The next thing that I wanted to talk about, the next element, is perspective. Perspective is really interesting because it really helps to focus the attention, particularly in images or image-based designs. It helps to focus the image of the audience. It creates a distant desire or reality. So in the image on the left, what we see is the little kid, and he's looking at these puppets. Now the key here is that he's in a car, but you can definitely tell due to the perspective that's taking place, and then also the direction that his eyes are pointed, that he's looking at these puppets. Now what this is, he's not actually looking at it, but what this is telling us is that the kid is really engaged, he's really enjoying this car, and it's somewhat like play for him. In the other image, what we're looking at is essentially a very strong perspective of a train coming at us. Now the train itself isn't really the content of this ad, it has to deal with a new insulated joint. But the idea of a train really gives us a sense of immediacy, the sense that we have to do something about it. But it also gives us a sense of durability as well. Now, an important point having to do with perspective is the way perspective and line interact. What you can see here is I've actually drawn the perspectives on so that we can see them. What we want to look for is essentially how lines connect to each other. So in the car image, we see the curtains and we see the tops of the seats essentially create a distant horizon, which is what the person's looking at. And then the other image, what we've got is the two ends of the rail that essentially converge off into the distance that point us in the direction of this train. And the train is what's essentially on the horizon for us as well, what our eyes are looking at. Okay, let's define a couple of these terms again. So the first one we talked about, line. Line is a continuous form of connection between 2 points. It really connects 2 points like 2 ideas. Now, unlike what we might talk about in terms of mathematics, it doesn't have to be a straight line. It just has to be a way of connecting, and the way that we get between the 2 points makes a difference. The other term that we talked about is perspective, and this is how line draws to give an impression of height, width, and depth. A couple other aspects, we talked about horizon. Vanishing point we didn't talk about. Vanishing point is essentially the place of intersecting parallel and orthogonal lines. So when we drew those red lines, it's the point at which they met. Now the horizon essentially sits at where these vanishing points intersect. It helps determine the direction of the gaze of an audience member, or excuse me, of a character in there, the background of the image, where the audience should be looking at, and whether we're looking up or down in a particular image. I want to take a second now to take a step back and take some of the elements that we've been talking about so far and try and apply them in an image in a way that we can, again, like I said already, that we can start to analyze this image and break it down and understand what the meaning is. So I'm going to show you one image, and what I want you to do is I want you to look at and analyze the design elements that the author is using, or the designer is using, and then what's the intended meaning that the designer is trying to put out there with this image. Take a moment and look at this image. Pause this video and try and identify what I just talked about. Okay, let me talk to you about what I'm seeing in terms of the design elements and the overall intention. First of all, form is what makes this image. We got the image of the person. We got the image of the person. We got the image of the iPod. We've got the essentially the form of the logo. Key points, particularly from the standpoint of the person, it's not a full image. It doesn't have details. It's just a silhouette. That's an important key point here. The key point being the iPod is the focus. The iPod is what we have detail on. It's where our attention should start out at, which we should be looking at. Size is also pretty important here. The text in general is smaller. It's less important. It's still present in case you want to sort of add to it, but it's less important. The iPod itself is also pretty small, at least in comparison to the form. Yet in this case, the smaller iPod dominates because of it's relatively isolated from the rest of the ad. It's over off to the side, but particularly the color. The white is what jumps out at us more than the black. So but in this case, it's the small size of the iPod that also helps to draw that in. Now, there's two particular lines that I want to point out. Again, line being connection between 2 points. The first is from the iPod to the ears, to the headphones, essentially. Now, if you have seen the ads, this is a really important point about it because the person dances around, and you see the line essentially move. And that really draws an attention. But even here, where the line isn't moving, we can still see a connection between the iPod and the ears. The other line that we should be concerned about is the line made from the body to the hand that sticks off to the right side. What this is talking about is really sort of fun, informal, dancey, all of these kinds of ideas are being communicated through this particular line that they've created. There's also a very slight perspective here. It's kind of hard to see, and it's very, very slight, but it has to deal with the way that the person is standing and holding the iPod. It's a little bit further back, it's a little bit off in the distance, and as we talked about with perspective, that's the direction our gaze should be going in, or at least where it should be starting at. So that helps to sort of set this whole ad up for us. And we've kind of talked about it with regard to the ads, but I think the intention here is to really create a fun, dancey, very active way to perceive the iPod. And they're trying to show this the way they want it to be used, and it's coming through in this ad. Okay, let's jump back to some of the design elements. First one that we're going to talk about is white space. Now, we've already talked about form. We've implied space. So essentially, white space is all of the space around a particular form. I call it white space here. I'm also meaning any kind of space that we use within an image. We can think of the space, the lack of content, as being an element that we can use. It doesn't just have to be white, as you see in the Aurora, actually, the image above. It can be multicolored, and it still stands sort of separating main form areas. And it's really about what is standing out and what is. We also have this very clever makeup ad. What we have up in the top left corner are 3 different smudges of makeup. Now, the idea is they're trying to advertise these wipes. So what we want to do is we want to remove the presence of those forms, and that's where they're putting their text. And it's just a very powerful way to do it. And at the bottom, we also use a lot of space on the left-hand side to help align and give a strong dimension for the rest of the ad. Lastly, we've got the iPod ad at the bottom. And really what I wanted to say is you can see a great deal of variety in terms of where space is and how it's used. Now, we can also talk about white space as you know, it can be difficult to use white space. Sometimes you have to be a little bit courageous. We have this desire to always fill up the entire canvas, but that is not good design. Good design requires focused placement of elements within a space, but then also using that space as an element within itself and become truly engaging by using all that space. Because if we don't use that space properly, this is what we get. This is a website called SIP Hawaii, and it's just way too crowded. There's way too much going on, and if you try and find something on there, it becomes virtually impossible because there's just no space. There's no breathing room for you to find exactly what you're looking for. Now, for what it's worth, I found this website on something called Websites That Suck. So that gives you an idea about where this all comes from. Okay, last bit of terminology for this lesson. First, from the standpoint of white space. So the white space is really the page, surface, or area in which the design will be placed. More white space draws the eye towards an entity, a form, a shape. Less becomes a lot harder without other visual contrast. It becomes very chaotic. You can pull it off, but it's difficult and you have to know what you're doing. Between space and form, we've used other relationships, other terms to talk about this, including figure ground, as well as positive and negative space. All of these are really synonymous terms, synonymous relationships that you should be aware of. Lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about texture. Now, this really sort of ties more into something about color Although I didn't really want to go into texture. There's not a whole lot to talk about with regard conceptually with regards to texture, but it does definitely create a more engaging space in which to see things. So we have a number of different images here, all of which are enhanced because they use texture. They help enhance the meaning and also make the images a lot more, have more depth. Okay, we're going to do another visual analysis activity, so it'll be the same as before. I want you to take a look at this image, and I want you to pause this image, and again, I want you to focus on what are the visual elements that we've talked about in regard to this ad, and also what's the intended meaning here. Okay, so what I'm taking from this ad is the following. First of all, from the standpoint of form, we have the BlackBerry form, we have the BlackBerry logo, we've also got sort of a D-shaped form that they use in several different places. I think that's supposed to be the bottom part of the B or something along those lines. We also have the form of the rugged, dirty man up in the top left corner. That's an aspect here. So we've got a couple different meanings that are in play. Size is also being used. The BlackBerry itself is very large. It's a dominant part of this ad. The man, on the other hand, is very small aspect. He's up in the top left corner. He's much smaller than even the BlackBerry. In addition, the text is very big, and even in comparison to the man, it takes up a lot more of the space on the ad. So what this is really saying is that the man in general, the person, is less important than the device itself and aspects about the device. And that's what the text is all about, is describing the device. Line isn't really a big thing here. It's actually kind of odd because they have some very weird alignments that you'll notice. It's kind of hard to follow a little bit. Also, perspective isn't really as big of an issue. You kind of have a slight perspective on the phone, which essentially, what I will say is it makes the phone feel less flat. It makes it feel a little bit more physical and tangible. So here we've got perspective that is just trying to make something seem a little bit more real as opposed to a head-on shot of the phone. From the standpoint of white space, I feel that this image is very cluttered. There's a lot going on here. It's all the text traps a lot of the space. There's no real systematic way that they're using to essentially figure out where the space goes. We've got some space above a bold enhancement text. We've got space between that and presenting the new BlackBerry Bold. It's just kind of randomly placed there. We've got some space between sort of the bulleted text and the BlackBerry. We've got this powered by the BlackBerry 6 OS centered. So they're using a lot of space pretty randomly in this image. Not a whole lot of texture in this image, although we can kind of say there might be a little bit of grimy texture in the image of the man. Now, in terms of the overall design, what they're going for is clearly, it's sleek but also rugged. And not only rugged but also bold. So we got that bold enhancement part. But really how it comes across is being a mishmash of imagery and ideas. There's no real consistent theme or way to pursue this, way to move through this image, and it's not very well executed in general.